Morning! Well, it's morning for me anyway. So, I haven't been putting out as many videos because I have just been incredibly busy here on the plot. The thing about growing food, you've also got to harvest it and do something with all the different types of food that you've got. So the last week or so, I've actually been quite busy prepping and harvesting crops to use and preserve for the rest of the year pretty much. And that's going to be ongoing for the next several weeks at least. So I'll do my best to do what I can for filming on here. Now there's a lot to do. Weeds really have taken hold on some of the beds. So today I really do need to get on with weeding. And at this time of year, with the amount of rain that we've actually had, and now a few days of sun that we've actually got, they really have gone crazy with the weeds this year. Now, one of the things that we are having lots of is comfrey. Now, this comfrey just comes through everything. It was already here on the plot before. There was no way we could dig it out, but we're making the most of it by making our comfrey tea, which I'll link down below in a previous video, how and what we use this comfrey tea for. There's still a lot of harvest. As you know from a previous video, we lost our outdoor tomato plants, but we were still able to salvage pretty much most of the tomatoes that were already on there. And they've already started to ripen up and we're able to pick and choose and use for our own cooking purposes. The polytunnel ones have all started to ripen, and you'll find once one or two start ripening, all of a sudden you'll start getting more and more and more. And I do believe tomatoes will ripen from the bottom to the top first. So our polytunnel we've been harvesting slowly at first, and then now we're actually taking out probably about 8 kilos at a time every other day, which is great, but it just means it's a lot of prep work for me to make all these different things with, just so we can actually use those tomatoes throughout the whole of the year, because let's be honest, there is so much you can make out of tomatoes. Another harvest that we've been getting loads of is our corns. Now, most of these cobs on here have actually been harvested already now. There is just a few cobs left in each area, which today will be the last day I pick. I'm happy to take them and process them and actually freeze, because I find it actually processes and freezes exceptionally well. This one down here, as you can see at this time of day, which it's still early morning, it's in a lot of shade. But this particular variety is called a maize, and it is absolutely beautiful. Much, much paler, almost a white to cream coloured cob. But it is so super sweet. And this is something that I'll definitely be growing in the future, but in a different area. Obviously, one of the other things, pretty much probably like you guys, courgettes. We've had a nice, slow, steady space of courgettes this year, even though we've got 4 plants. Now, I don't know whether it's the growing year, technically not being great, maybe, but I'm actually happy with the amount of courgettes we're getting at the pace we're getting. It's actually nice to be able to go out and just pick 2 or 3 off each plant every other day, maybe every 3 days, than to have a massive glut of them all in one go. But again, these are easily dealt with. There is so many ways to use courgette and to process and to have it in your freezer for future use. But there's loads of plans going on at the moment on Odd Socks. As you know, we've got the other cooking channel now, and this channel is going to focus more on the growing and the aspects of what we're doing on our plot. And now autumn is fast approaching, we're starting to make certain plans for next year, where we're going to put the new greenhouses, where we're building the additional new polytunnel. These kind of things to think about at this time of year is really good, where you can still see the growth of certain areas, certain beds, how pieces of land actually work throughout the whole of the year. So that's what we've been doing over the last few days. And even though we haven't quite finalised what we want to do, we have a rough idea of what we're going to do moving forward. Now, one of the things that we have been incredibly busy with is compost. We have the grass and the other bits and pieces, the green waste that we get for free, given to us, have been coming in absolutely thick and fast of late. Even wood chip, which we were trying to store for when we do the new dig beds. So with all this grass and hedge clippings, the soft clippings, things like that, all the brown material that we're actually getting, either from cardboard or old leaves that we've stored throughout the whole of the year, we've actually now filled 4 or 5 compost bays full of compost. Now, we're having to top up on a regular basis because they're still sinking. The one bay has been turned ready to use for the end of this year, for when we're making these new beds. The rest are still being worked on. Now, I'm hoping we should get more than enough compost this year to use for at least 80% of what we need to use it. But we'll have to see. I have no more spare bays. I want to keep one empty to be able to turn some of the compost that I'm making into the bay once it's finished, so it can literally leave it there to carry on maturing throughout the following months. Now, I've noticed it's feeling really autumnal at the moment here on Odd Socks plot. The light's gone more kind of orangey yellow that you get when you start hitting the September months. And this has been going on for the last week or so. And I actually have a squeaky tree. So there's definitely changes afoot in our weather. Our squash plants have started to die back slightly with their leaves. There's a few with a bit of powdery mildew, which basically with us, we just take the leaf off. But what you don't want to do is take all the leaves off of something like that, because how is your plant going to be able to photosynthesize any nutrients or food if it has no leaf? So unless you're happy for it to stop growing, leave some leaves on, because some leaves are better than no leaves, and it won't grow, and it may not even dry out properly if it hasn't reached the right maturity. Now, my runner beans have been really prolific this year, and have done exceptionally well. Unfortunately, my building skills have not been the same. We've had a lot of wind this year, and it actually knocked down one of my teepees. Now, this is how I originally found it. Then we tied it up to give it a little bit of extra support. But then it just kept snapping. The canes are so poor, the ones that we bought this year, where they really were just snapping extremely easy. And now it's lying on its side. So I'm going to harvest all these, because this plant was actually for my seeds next year. But now it's starting to droop and be really sad, because I think basically the roots have been damaged from it being pulled about, and a lot of it's actually snapped. We took about 4 kilos off it yesterday, and there's still a lot of beans to take off of this. So I'll pick the rest of these beans and leave the other plant to actually develop my seeds, either for growing next year or for using cooking throughout the rest of the year. It's not looking as full and voluptuous. Maybe I shouldn't do that with my hand when I say voluptuous. Just to see the overall shot of the actual plot itself. But really, that's what it is about this time of year. It's keeping everything as tidy as possible, sowing what you can sow, and actually harvesting what you've already grown. Hopefully this year has given you some ideas of what you can do or can't do very well for next year. Just because something hasn't succeeded this year, it doesn't mean that it never will do. It may have just been bad seed, bad germination, bad compost, bad position, bad weather, bad care, or it's simply something that you need to look at a little bit differently, and maybe it does need a few tweaks to be able to grow in that desired area. This is where research is really important. You can't just throw things into the ground necessarily and expect a fantastic return, even though in the past I have done things like that and had great return. But anything with certain needs, certain care, you really do need to think about where you're getting your seeds or your plants, what you're going to grow it in, and what position you're going to grow it in. There is no point growing something that's really, really thirsty if you're only going to come down to the plot one day a week. It's not going to work, especially through the height of summer, and especially if you're growing that into a large pot. So thank you guys for today. It is a quick little video today, and I've got a few things that I'm hoping to film this week. A bit more in depth of how-tos or what we're actually going to do. But for today, thank you. And I hope your harvests are going really, really well. But we'll see you in the next video.